Hi guys, and welcome to another video. In this one I am planning to do some research. Actually, the research has already been done. I'm here actually just to tell you the results. More exactly, what I've done is I took all the televotes and all the jury's votes from the past 10 contests excepting 2013. So actually I went to the last 11 years. I added 2010 instead of 2013. For those that don't know, in 2013 EBU decided not to release like a very transparent full split voting thing. They just kind of published the average ranks of the televote and the average ranks of the juries. It was like a total mess. I don't even really understood how that worked. So because of that, in everything that I'm going to be talking in this video, 2013 is not included. Also, all the data that I'm using here and all the graphics that you're going to see in this video, you will find them as images on my Patreon page. You will find the link down below. Also, thank you to my Patreons. The answer that I was really looking for was, is there really a country that is definitely favored by the juries, and are there countries that are definitely favored by the televote? And the way I did this was I took the differences in televotes and jury votes from each year for each country in the grand final. All of these are referring only to the grand final. If I would have went to the semifinals, it would have taken me forever. But maybe I will do that at some point just to like complete this video. But for now, we're all gonna stick just to the grand finals. And I added those differences. Now, you will see two types of results. You will see something that is negative, like minus something, and positives. The positive result or the positive score that they will get are in favor of the televote. It means that in the past 10 editions, those countries have received more points from the televoters than the juries. On the other hand, if the results are gonna be with minus, it means that they received more points from the juries than the televoters. And also, it does not mean that is bad. I know that one of them is gonna be negative. It's just for me to kind of make the difference so you guys understand if that country is on the jury side or on the televote side. In the end, I'm also gonna see if there are any sort of suggestions for countries to figure out how to win, what they need to improve, also based on the voting. If any countries have some sort of advantages and some countries are definitely in disadvantage. And the two main questions, which is the most beloved by televoters and which one is the most beloved by the juries? If we are ready, I would say let's start. I can explain a lot more about how this works once you will see the actual stuff on screen. And the first country that you are gonna see right now is Russia. And Russia, surprise, surprise, is the most beloved by the televoters. As you can see in this graph, you will see these blue columns. The blue columns represent the difference in voting every year. For example, in 2010, Russia would have received 44 more points from the televoters than the juries, and in 2021, Russia received 4 points more from the juries than the televoters. Those are the blue columns. I think they're very easy to understand. The white arrow line represents the trend. So we will see for different countries the trend kind of changes. For a couple of years, the juries were supporting more, and then the televoters became bigger fans of those songs from that country. This might also be because they've changed the system in which they choose the song, or maybe something politically happened, or maybe we just like the new music that they're sending. Talking about Russia, their total score is 841. That means that in the past 10 editions, Russia would have received, because we know that prior to 2016 we did not give the points this way, but just imagine we did. In the past 10 editions, the televoters gave them 841 points more. 4 times Russia had a difference of over 100 points, and 2 times over 200 points. That is a lot. Their average score does end up to 105.1 points. That is quite a high score. You're gonna see compared to the others how this is gonna slow down. And also a cool thing that is in my mind is the fact that since Russia is so beloved by the televote, they're relying a lot. And if by any meaning that does not happen, Russia doesn't do too well, Russia's numbers will drop. And this is what happened in 2021, considering they didn't really support Manja that much. It is shown this is the first year when actually the juries gave them more points than the televoters. It's true, only 4 points difference, but still. We are moving next to Poland. This is the second most beloved country by the televoters by difference. with a total score of 405, but I remind you, this is 405 points out of only 4 finals that they have been in since 2010. Now again, out of those 4, twice they were over 100 points in difference in the favor of the televoters, and we all know 2016 when the difference was huge, over 200 points difference. That is a lot. That's an oopsie pretty much from the juries. It seems that if Poland does manage to qualify, they do qualify because of the televotes and because people really like them. Ukraine is the next country, and in the early 2010s, as you can see, Ukraine seemed to be a lot more supported by the juries, but slowly the televoters warm up to them. Now, I don't want to be the person who says that, but if you see the year when the change kind of started is 2014, I wonder if something happened in 2014 to change people's minds. They competed 8 times in the final, 6 times they got more points from the televoters. Again, 3 times the difference was more than 100 points, which is a lot, with the biggest difference being 170 in favor of the televote, and that was in 2021. Next, we're going to Romania, which is another country that is like strongly supported by the televotes. Just like Ukraine, it seems that the early 2010s were more like jury's favorite, although those differences are pretty much neglectable. But starting 2012, clearly the audience liked the acts from Romania a lot more than the juries, with the big climax in 2017 with Ilinca and Alex, which received 166 points more from the televoters. After that, Romania kind of took a break from being in the finals in Eurovision. Next on the list we have Serbia, another country that is strongly supported by the fans. I will argue probably a lot of the Balkans too. We will see more about that towards the end when I'm doing like an analysis of the results. Over the past 10 editions, Serbia scored 304 points, clearly a favorite of the televote. They competed 8 times in the finals, 7 times they received more points from the televoters. And although the numbers per se don't seem as big, they are many, like 7 out of 8 is a lot. Their biggest difference though was only 73 points, which I'm only saying only, that is quite a big difference. But compared to the big numbers, this is an only 73. Italy is next, and in Italy we can clearly see the big switch. Once they came back in 2011, Italy was very strongly supported by the juries, but later in the decade, the televoters came through, and right now Italy is one of the biggest fan favorites. An interesting thing for me is that out of those 9 finals that they've been into, in 5 of them the difference was more than 100 points, which makes it very strange. It seems that the juries and the televoters just cannot agree when it comes to Italy. Their biggest difference also was 190 points. That's a big difference. Next we're going to Turkey. The data for Turkey obviously is not all that relevant right now anymore, but in the 2 finals that they take part in the past 10 editions, clearly the fans supported Turkey a lot more than the juries, and they scored a 182 on this game of mine. Can't wait for them to come back to see how everything changes. Moldova is next, another country that by average it is supported a lot by the televoters, but if you do look at the graph a little bit closer, most of those big numbers are being pulled by 2017 Moldova with Hey Mama. Other than that, I feel like the audience and the juries kind of agreed the differences are very small, but the 2017 with an over 150 points difference makes the difference in this case. Armenia seems to be a country that is kind of losing steam with the televoters. The early 2010s seemed to be very supportive with Armenia. The votes were coming in, people were calling, but starting 2014, 2015, everything kind of went downhill, as also the trend shows. On average, Armenia is still favored over in the past 10 years by the televoters, but definitely the trend moves now towards the juries more. And also this is what happened in other countries that I talked about earlier that were like very much supported by the televotes. If you do start losing those, you stopped qualifying, and that's what happened with Armenia. And if we remember the same thing with Romania, I feel that this might be a generation switch where they listen to different styles of music now, and the audience that is voting is very young, so you kind of have to do an update towards them. Personally, I'm not a very big fan of that. I still like my 2000s music pretty much. But talking just from the point of view of Eurovision winning and competing, I think these countries should do a switch. I know it worked very well for them for a while, but if you see that the televoters do not like connect with you anymore, maybe you should do the switch. Next on the list we have Greece. Greece finds itself in kind of the same problem. It is still supported in average by the televoters, but this is also mostly pulled by the early 2010s. The numbers clearly dropped and moved more towards the juries in the past years, but they're still above zero, which means that the fans should still be there. But if we were to take only the past 6 years, let's say, into consideration, clearly they're more of the jury's type of acts than actual televoters. Lithuania, on the other hand, did the exact opposite. It feels like they found a solution for it. I'm very curious if this is just a fluke or not. Up to this year, pretty much the juries and the televoters agreed on Lithuanian acts. The differences were very small, except for this year, where I'm not even sure if most of the votes came because of the song or it just came for the Roop. Roop had a huge fan base. They managed to do this starting 2020. If this is something that works, this style of music and this style of like acts and performances, maybe Lithuania should stick to it. They should try it maybe one more year to see if the results are moving the same way, or if that just dropped, then it means it was mostly the Roop and not the song itself. Next we're going to Hungary. Hungary seemed to be very strongly supported by the juries in the early 2010s, I would say, and I kind of remember that. The numbers did switch once Yoshi Papai came in. He was a big fan favorite, people really liked him. Unfortunately, it didn't work the same way in 2019, which kind of surprised me, to be honest. Right now, also considering the political climate in Hungary, I am not sure how the fans would react to the entrances from Hungary. I think it would depend a lot on the artist, like the type of message the artists are gonna put out there. This would be very interesting for me to see. Like, I am actually curious after all these changes, what would happen with Hungary if they would rejoin. The steam was definitely in the televoter side for them. Croatia is next, and this data was not really all that relevant. Croatia has 2 finals in this time span, and they're clearly in the camp of the televoters. 2017 is pretty much the year that kind of grabbed everything on the televote side, with a difference of 71, but as I said, with only 2 years, this data is not all that relevant. Croatia has to try other stuff to qualify. Iceland, on the other hand, they went a long way with the juries in the early 2010s. Then they took a break from qualifying, which again, like, I feel like these graphics really represent that. I do feel that that's when a newer generation, like the new generation, kind of took over in the way people vote for what people vote. And Iceland, that was not even voted all that much in the early 2010s, kind of lost themselves and they stopped qualifying altogether. But starting 2019, they come up with something a bit more extreme, which obviously got them a lot of points, and this is why they find themselves on the side of the televotes. But in 2021, they went back down to the juries, which is also surprising because I thought the Roop and Daddy would do pretty much the same. With Daddy definitely got more points from the televote. I'm just saying that the difference with the juries is different. This is actually what would bring you a lot higher in the rankings. I feel the way Iceland ended up this year is by also having a lot of votes, because even though the trend shows downwards towards the juries, that does not mean that people did not vote for Iceland. I still feel that people voted a lot for Iceland, but the juries voted even more for Iceland, and this is the way you end up in a top 5. I do think Iceland is doing a very good job, and starting 2019 they really reinvented themselves. Let's not forget, in 2020 they were also favorites to win. When I was talking about these graphs about Romania or Greece, this is exactly what I meant when their trend just stops because they never qualify anymore. Obviously, Iceland went through that. They needed like a few years to figure out what's going on, but once they decided we're not going boring anymore, yeah, this is why I feel like this type of statistics are helpful. Next in this list, I have Finland, and let me tell you, first of all, I was very surprised to find out that Finland only qualified 3 times. I don't know why. I had this memories of Finland being like a constant qualifier. Obviously I was wrong. Let's see if Finland figure out a new way to do things, because obviously they were jury's favorites again in the early 2010s, and then everything changed later, but the change came after many years of not qualifying. So let's see if they're pulling like an Iceland here, and if they figure out the way this works, and next year they're gonna be very high again. The next statistics are for San Marino, and I know this graphic looks a little bit weird. That's mostly because we have only 3 points of reference, because they've only been in 3 finals, and 2 of them have a very big difference between them. One was favored by the televoters and one was favored by the juries. San Marino right now, I do feel, just like this graph looks like, I feel like San Marino is a crapshoot. Like, you don't know if they will or they won't. But in this case, it does seem that in the past 2 years they did qualify, so maybe they did figure out a way of not being what the fans would consider boring. And actually, now that while I'm filming this video and I'm talking, I realize that the fans absolutely totally switched towards more, not necessarily extreme stuff, but stuff that are not usual. It's like saying na na na, Adrenalina definitely are not one of those songs that you would be like bored by. But also I feel like a lot of the visuals play a huge thing into it. And if we remember Iceland, the exact same thing. In 2019 they had like a very interesting aesthetic on stage, and in 2021 they came up with something different too, which makes me think that maybe the visuals are very important now in these years right now. I don't want to be that old guy, but maybe these new kids that are watching Eurovision, they need a lot more stimulant in their brain, like they need flashlights and colors and stuff to happen on stage. Maybe this is what is going on right now. And honestly, if we remember like how Eurovision usually works, they always go through like a phase where everything is like flashy and out there. And then while that audience is getting older, I feel like everything kind of chills out in the way the winners go or the trend goes with the music. Then again, like ballads and slow songs and calm, nice things start winning. And then we have another era of everything just flash and crazy and flashlights and costumes and peacock feathers and stuff like that. And I feel that we might just be now in the new generation, where the new generation wants flash and feathers again. The one thing that I'm sure about is that whatever worked in early 2010s, it does not work now. And if the audience would be the same, I think it would still work. It's obviously because the audience changed. Then we have Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Bosnia and Herzegovina, we only have data from the early 2010s. That's also when they lost steam and they stopped qualifying and they stopped participating altogether. Now, to be honest, I don't remember exactly the reasons why they stopped competing. Maybe it's a financial thing. And now we have Ireland next. Ireland is actually the country closest to 0 points. So like, the televotes and the juries kind of agreed over 10 years. Now, they did play in 4 finals. The first 2 that are seen in this graph are the Jedwards, which actually to me was very surprising to see this, that the juries gave them more points than the televoters, which makes me think this has a lot to do with Louis Walsh and with influence he has in music. 2012 is the year when the televoters picked Ireland a lot higher, but in the end still their average is towards the juries, and this is the first country that now moves into the area where the juries helped more than the televotes. And now we're in Switzerland, the neutral country, also very close to the 0. The results for Switzerland are very like scarce, because they qualify and then they don't, and then they do and then they don't. In the past 2 years they did qualify, and they're clearly pulling towards the juries with this year. I mean, is anyone surprised that the juries really like John Steers? I mean, that for me, that was like so obvious that the juries are gonna love that song. And honestly, I did believe that a lot of the televoters will not like it as much, but I still thought that he's gonna get a lot more points at 165. It doesn't seem like for Switzerland there is a huge trend, like it doesn't go more towards the televotes or the juries. Next on the list I have Norway, and Norway went very much with the juries in the early 2010s, but the big blunder of 2019 happened with over 251 points difference. And imagine that even with that huge difference, Norway seems to be more on the side of the juries. Although in the past 3 editions it seems that people kind of warmed up to Norway and they did get more points from the televotes. Also in total Norway had 3 times when the difference was over 100 points. It was twice on the jury side, but then that 2019 just killed it, like they just neutralized that. Next we're gonna go to Belarus, and Belarus is one of those countries again that they qualify, then they don't, then they do, then they don't. The results are pretty much all over the place, but also the differences are very small. It's like 4 points, 17 points, so the difference is not that big. It seems that the juries and the televoters agree with each other. Montenegro, another country that I kind of missed, and I hope they're gonna come back. Again, I'm not sure if they are not competing anymore for the same financial reasons. They tended to be liked a lot more by the juries, and to be honest, I am not surprised. It did seem like they were going usually for this Balkan feeling that would work well with the juries and not as much with the televoters. But again, we only have 2 points of data here, and it's not very representative. Bulgaria, on the other hand, as you can see, and now this is why I feel like my theory is working. Bulgaria did not do too well in the early 2010s, and if I remember correctly, not even in the late 2000s. In the past 5 editions though, Bulgaria qualified 4 times. You're definitely doing something very well now that is more interactive with, again, I feel like I'm repeating this a lot, like the new generation of fans. They did get a lot of votes from the fans, but still they're landing more on the jury side, because this year definitely Victoria was more beloved by the juries than they were by the televoters. Czech Republic qualified 3 times. It seems like it's an up and down here in this graph with them, but even though they only qualified 3 times, they've managed twice to be divisive, and the differences are quite big. 149 and 143 difference in only 3 qualifications. I think that just shows that Czech Republic needs to find a song that is like a common point for both juries and televoters to push them all the way up. Georgia, again, another country, they qualified 4 times. In early 2010s, they were kind of split, like the people liked it, the juries liked it. It seems that mid 2010s everything switched more towards the juries, but then they also stopped qualifying. Again, I do feel that Georgia needs a little bit of a reboot. In 2016, I'm actually surprised that they didn't do a lot better with the televoters. They were one of my favorites acts. But right after all that craziness, they just stopped altogether qualifying, which is sad, but I'm guessing they're just finding again what is working. United Kingdom is next, and this graph looks quite interesting. Because of the 2011's entry, clearly the graph was favoring the televotes. But if we look on an average, it does seem that the juries mostly are supportive with United Kingdom. And in some of the years the differences are very, very small, also because the results were very, very small. And in the past 3 editions, pretty much they flatlined on very small differences between the juries and the televoters. And I would say this also shows in the final results, like they need to be a little bit more edgy somehow on some side. Germany, on the other hand, went again all over the place. They had an early 2010 that was very much fan supported. Also, it started with Lena. And to be honest, those 3 years that you see there are the years that were kind of like supported by Stefan Raab. He's the one who was looking for the performers, and they had this competition, but they were pretty much led by Stefan Raab, and he had a big input on what Germany is going to send. And then I think in 2014, if I remember correctly, it might have been 2013, I don't know, he decided to retire. I think it was after Roman Lob. He said he's not gonna do that anymore. And that shows in the televote numbers, because everything instantly just flipped now on the jury side instead of televoters. So obviously Stefan Raab knew how to connect with people. Then we do have Germany 2018. Germany 2018 was my favorite song in 2018. That was my winner. That one was strongly supported by the juries, and this is what pretty much pulls everything on the jury side. Estonia next. They qualified 5 times in these past 10 years. They seem to be mostly supported by the juries. Also, the differences don't seem to be necessarily that big, although like 275s over 70s is quite noticeable. But this also shows probably that Estonia is trying diverse things, so some years something that is working with the audience and sometimes stuff that is working with the juries. I do think that in order to become a winner you do need to work both sides. Denmark, on the other hand, again, early 2010s, supported by the juries. It kind of fell through for a couple of years there, coming back in 2017 in the finals, with 2018 giving them the biggest difference in the favor of the televotes, but the jury supported Denmark so much in the previous years that the trend is still going towards the juries. Another country that has ups and downs, sometimes beloved by the televotes, sometimes beloved by the juries. It does seem to make waves, which I do think it is a good thing, even though I would say the past few results were not all that grandiose. Their biggest difference was in 2012 when the juries gave 109 points more than the televote. That's the year where I do feel that the televoters could have like chipped in a lot stronger. That was a great song and I'm absolutely not surprised that the juries really voted for it. Azerbaijan, this is surprising to me. I really thought that Azerbaijan is mostly supported by televotes, but no, it seems that the juries are on their side mostly. Granted, out of the 9 finals, 6 times the televoters gave them more points, but when the juries give them points, the difference is huge. This pulls Azerbaijan down to a -71. Also, I will tell you, the minus does not mean it's a bad thing, it's just the way I make the difference between juries and the televotes. Next, we're gonna move on to France, and France seems to be the country that just fell off the favor of the televoters. They had a strong 2010 with a difference of 117 in the favor of the televotes, but then it pretty much dropped the whole way to the juries almost every year. The differences are obviously not that big, but they are many, and that just keeps adding up. Just like Azerbaijan, Cyprus is a country that surprised me. Again, I thought that Cyprus is mostly supported by the people, and it seems that no, most of the points are coming from the juries. The biggest difference obviously happened in 2018 when everyone wanted Fuego. Other than that, pretty much the jury supported Cyprus. This gives them a score of -93, and then Albania is the one that I'm actually not surprised. Albania does seem to be sending songs that are mostly done for the juries. It does seem though that in the past 2 years they kind of warm up towards televote, although the differences are not that big. I'm curious to see how this line will look next year. Will people vote for it? Albania seems to be very festival-y. Obviously, they have a festival that pick the songs. Usually they send very good vocals, which makes me think that that's why the juries mostly prefer Albania. I'm not saying that the televoters don't like them, I'm just saying that the juries like them a lot more. Next one is Belgium, which is mostly supported again by the juries. What surprises me is that 2017 is the one that kind of broke that rule, was Blanche with City Lights. I will admit, I am sorry, I did not like that performance. I kind of like the song and the music video, but the live thing, not that much. So I'm not surprised that the juries did not vote that strongly for it. The difference there was 147 points, which is quite big. But then again, in 2010, Belgium was supported by the juries by over 100 points. Israel ended up with a score of -138, which means that it is like greatly supported by the juries. Again, it did seem that Israel kind of took a break in the early 2010s, okay, if we ignore 2010 when they actually got a lot of points from the juries. Starting 2015, they were requalifying, and since they start requalifying, there isn't really a big change, I feel. 3 times they were supported by the televotes, 3 times by the juries. The numbers from the jury seem to be a lot bigger, but it's also mostly because of that 2010. Of course, they had their 2018, which we were expecting to get a lot of points from the televoters. But then something that surprises me is the 2016, which I thought was a very good song. And the juries mostly agreed with me. We did not really vote for it. I want to say they did not vote for it, but I'm guessing I'm part of it. I did not vote for Israel that year either, but I thought it was a very good song and a very good performance. And this is also like a difference that I'm kind of noticing here when the songs are written for the juries. The ones that do very well are the ones that both manage to convince the juries in a very big way and the televoters. And the songs that are actually kind of written for the televoters but somehow move the juries too, kind of like Neta Toy. Next, we're moving to Slovenia, and starting here, it seems like the graph just changes. It is clearly in the favor of the juries. The biggest difference was in 2011. The difference is 121 points. That's quite big. Portugal next. They qualified 4 times, and all 4 times they received more points from the juries than from the audience, including 2017. The biggest difference was this year 99 points between the televotes and the juries. Somehow I'm not all that surprised. I did know that that song will work very well with the juries. I did wish that they received a lot more points from the televotes, but I mean, well, this is the way this works. I'm pretty sure this song would have done very well in the early 2010. Next on the list is Latvia. Latvia only qualified twice. The data is not all that relevant, but the biggest difference is in 2015 with Love Injected, obviously a song written for the juries. I'm actually a little bit surprised I didn't get more points from the televoters. The difference was 149 points. North Macedonia, another country that only qualified twice, and the story is very similar. In 2019, Tamara, the difference was 189 points. That is a huge difference. Another song that was very festival-y. It was very well written for songwriters, so it worked well with the juries. The Netherlands next. After they took their break in the early 2010s, they came back strong, and they're mostly supported by the juries, obviously, with a score of minus 219. And the biggest difference, 120 points. That one came in 2017. It does seem though that in the past few years the audience kind of warmed up to the Netherlands, although 2021 should not really be taken into consideration because I have a feeling that if they compete in the semi-final they didn't even qualify. Next on the list we have Austria, and Austria is one of the countries that is like very much supported by the juries, a score of minus 273. They qualified 6 times in the final, 4 of which were in the favor of the jury, with one of them a very big difference, 200 points. I do remember that year. That year was very surprising. I did not think that they're gonna finish first with the juries, but they did. But also let's not forget 2011 when also the juries kind of pooled the points more on their side. Next we have Sweden. Sweden is not the country that's helped by the juries the most. I kind of thought Sweden will be the first. I don't know why. When I started doing this, I had this bias towards Sweden. I was like, Sweden is gonna be first with the juries. But it is not, because Sweden apparently was very much supported by the fans in the early 2010s. But a very big change happened starting 2015 after their second win. I'm not sure now if necessarily everything is because the juries are very supportive to Sweden or because the fans don't really vote for Sweden all that much because Sweden already won twice in the past decade. Overall, 3 times the difference was more than 100 points. Twice in favor of the juries, with 1 time over 230 points. That's insane. That's a huge difference. We've only seen that with Russia, and that pretty much happened on the televote side, and of course the one with Norway. But the graph clearly shows that the juries now lately are a lot more supportive to Sweden. Again, I'm not sure if it's a support from the juries or some bitterness from the fans. I do hear a lot this thing that Sweden is overrated, the same way that I hear a lot that Italy is overrated. Funny enough, both of them are kind of on the extremes of the range, and one of them very supported by the juries, one of them very supported by the televote, so I'm guessing this is how you make people talk about you. On the second place we have Australia, which since they started competing, Australia every single year received more points from the juries than the televote. Twice more than 100 points. The biggest difference was 169 points in the favor of the jury, and that was in 2017. Also, I am very curious how that happened. I will be very honest, I did think that the live performance, especially in our final, the final that the audience sees, I don't think that it went too well. And the fact that the juries gave him that many points, it makes me think that something else might have happened or everything worked out a different way in the final for the juries. But also, if we are to look a little bit at the trend, it does seem that the juries are kind of losing a little bit of interest in the Australian entry, and this is probably what happened this year. If Australia is counting that much on the juries, then the artists that they are sending should be very festival-y, let's put it that way. Like, if they go for something a little bit too crazy as what they've tried to do this year. Number one, the country that is mostly supported by the juries is Malta. Malta qualified 5 times, again every single time mostly supported by the juries, twice over 100 points, although there is one time when the difference was 98. They have an average of minus 101 points. This also makes me wonder what is going on. Like, do people just don't want to vote for Malta, or are the songs very much jury songs and people don't connect to it? Because I do feel like the song from this year, although it had that end part that was pretty much meant for the juries 100%, that was where the voice should have shined, the staging and everything else, it seemed to very much want to connect to the audiences. And if that would have worked out for Malta, I have a feeling that Malta had a very good chance of actually winning. Now that we went through all the countries, I just want to show you a few more stats, like how everything looks like when it's on the range of juries /televote. On this list, obviously, we have Malta all the way to the top on the side of the jury, and we have Russia all the way on the bottom on the side of the televotes. Again, this does not mean that one is better than the other, it's just the way the range works. I should have made it right to left probably. And I wanted to see how it looks when the Balkans are in. And I do say the Balkans are mostly moving towards the bottom, so more towards the televote. It might also be because some of the countries do like to vote each other, and this is actually now the controversy part of this video. It's kind of like I want to see if the differences are really that big to actually influence results. I will remind you that if you look on this list, Ireland is the country that makes the switch from the televotes to juries, so a fewer countries are mostly supported by the televote and a lot more from the juries, which actually is counterintuitive. It means the opposite. It means that the televote has a bigger power in choosing who to push forward. Although let's not neglect the ones on the very top of the jury, because they're being quite influential too. Next, I want to see the big 5. How are they doing? And except for Italy, who is on one side of the televote, the others are quite central, like pretty much in the middle. And this is what I've noticed, maybe the first difference. The reason why everyone is saying the big 5 are so bad except for Italy is because Italy apparently does get pushed a lot by the televote. So Italy is always like outside of the big 5 group. Italy is doing a lot better than the 5 are usually. Then I also look to see how the ex-Soviet Union countries are doing. They seem to be a little bit more scarce, but mostly they are very much cramped in the televote down there. Like 5 out of the top 11 are ex-Soviet, which do make me think that they are kind of giving each other some votes. I'm not sure if it influences year by year the result, but like over a span of 10 years it is noticeable. Then I wanted to see how the Nordic countries are doing, and they're very much central-ish, I would say. It doesn't seem, although people like to talk a lot about them because they like to give each other points, it seems like it's not all that influential. Another combo that people talk a lot about is Greece and Cyprus. If you look on this list again with Greece and Cyprus, they're not even in the same area. They should both be in the televote if the difference would be all that big. Now I also want to look at the winners, and I have here the past 9 winners. I did mark in red the past 6 just because I feel like they're more relevant for this data than the previous ones, but I just wanted to see where they are actually on the list. And if you look, it's very clear that in order to win, you have to be very much on one of the sides. You cannot stay in the middle. The countries that usually win are either very much supported by the televote constantly, and then one year they do something to bring the other side with them, or they're on the jury and they bring the televotes on their side. Actually, if you are to think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Like Russia would have a lot of chances to win if somehow they would convince the juries to vote for them. And that's also why Sweden has a lot of chances of winning, because if the juries are already voting for you, all you have to do is have someone that is very liked by the audience and a song that is very good with a good performance, and then you win because the jury votes are already there. Now, to do the contrast, I'm going to be looking at the last places in these past 10 years, and what to see. Most of them are really in the middle of the way. France, Spain, Germany, United Kingdom, Norway, Switzerland and Ireland, all of them like very central. So in the end, the last slide that I'm gonna show you is the one where I do actually show you the splits between which ones are mostly getting points from the juries and which ones are mostly getting points from the televotes. The countries that are getting mostly points from the televotes actually do not surprise me. They seem to be the countries that are part of like one of the blocks. Is either you're part of the Balkans or you're part of the ex-Soviet. You don't really see a lot of Central Europe in there. My conclusion would be that there is an influence on the way people vote, the televote and the countries voting for each other, but I don't think that if you split it year by year, it makes such a huge difference. This difference is mostly noticeable if you do like this big time span. Because let's remember, Russia does get the most votes by far from all of the countries, but then in the past 10 years they did not manage to win at all. And by the same logic, Malta is first with the juries and again they never won. But my biggest takes from this whole journey that I did here, like 2 days, there is a clear difference in a lot of the countries that were doing very well with one side of the voting part. In the early 2010s, they lost that steam usually in 2015, which makes me think that something big did happen in 2015. If you did not manage to somewhat like adapt to that change, you are losing steam. A lot of the countries that used to qualify a lot in early 2010 stopped qualifying for a while until they figured out how to go back. Other countries still qualified, but somehow their votes were switching from one side to the other. And yeah, overall, I do feel that the generations do influence Eurovision a lot. And I know that right now I'm probably in the minority. I was part of the majority when it was coming to voting, probably like mid-2000s towards late 2000s, and then I kind of lost a little bit of interest in the early 2010s, I would say. Then I kind of liked the mid-2010s, and it feels like starting around 2018, I would say, the things that fans really tend to like a lot does not connect with me anymore. But I don't care, because there is still a lot of music for me and my old soul. So even if I don't like the chicken song, I still have Amar pe los dois, and I know that a lot of people don't like that. And when you have those two winners next to each other, it's quite a thing. I know you guys have a lot of thoughts probably. Please let me know in the comments what you think. All I was looking for pretty much was a trend. I wanted to see if there are countries that are favored a lot by one side of the voting system that we have right now. I did start this with a preconception. I pretty much thought that Russia gets a lot of televotes and that Sweden gets a lot of jury votes. I was quite right about Russia, not that right about Sweden, although let's not complain, Sweden still got a lot of jury juice. But in the early 2010s, Sweden was supported by fans. On the other hand, I also wanted to see why some countries that don't do too well don't do too well, and that's usually because they're very much in the middle part of that arrow. And that is not good. You should choose a side and keep pushing that side until 1 year. The year when you are gonna grab the other side with you, but keep working on that one specific side. And I think this is what Sweden does very well. If people were saying why does Sweden win twice, that's why. I think they're working the juries a lot. The juries would vote for them a lot, and then all they have to do is find a song a year. It is maybe a little bit of luck too, when the audience would resonate with it, and that's enough for them to win. That's why the winners are so much on the extremes, because they only have to bring the other side on their side and then they win. If you are in the middle of that arrow, then you have to fight a lot more, because you have to convince both sides to vote for you, and that's a lot harder. So I would recommend to the countries to try to fight to move towards one of the edges. And then for the countries that just suddenly stopped qualifying, maybe change a little bit the way you're thinking about Eurovision. Keep in mind the generations change. Find something new. If you feel that you're the head of delegation and nothing works, maybe it's better to step down and let someone younger or someone that's like more in touch with the fandom to take over the whole process. Yeah, and those are pretty much my conclusions. I feel like I've talked a lot. I hope I wasn't too annoying. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments down below. Also, I remind you, if you're a Patreon, you can find all this statistics for each country on the Patreon page. See you guys in a future video. Please stay safe. Bye.